this first home game that you guys had?
Crowd was crazy. You can hear it through the headphones most of the time, so it really gives you energy and hypes you up when you're playing.
Harrison Brown from Total Sports Live. What have you guys thought of Philly as a city so far?
Everyone liked this city, and today we feel awesome crowd. Yeah, so amazing.
Darby Joyce of WatchLeague.com. This question is mostly for Carpe because you're the only returning player. How has your first homestand differed from your experience with past Philadelphia fan events in the city?
이제 카르 선수 다음 질문인데요. 이제 이번 홈스탠드가 지난 이제 홈스탠드에 비해서 어땠나요? 뭐 다른 점이 있었다면?
지난번에 홈스탠드 언제 홈스탠드
그 아마도 are you talking about like the Atlanta and like the other cities homestands? Or?
Yeah.
네, 그럼 아틀란타나 다른 도시.
아틀란타 뭐 이런 곳에서 홈스탠드 했을 때 이제 홈 경기다 보니까 이제 홈팀 선수들 되게 응원하는 그런 걸 되게 많이 느꼈는데 오늘 확실히 진짜 엄청 대단한 저희 팬들이 저를 응원해 주는 걸 확실히 느꼈고 내일도 또 기대가 돼요.
Okay, so he's saying so like for past homestands, you can feel the crowd cheering for their home team, and that was crazy. But like for this, like for this homestand, he could definitely hear them, and like that was amazing, and he can definitely feel that kind of support from behind him, and he's really excited for tomorrow too.
So my question is for Carpe. So is there a team or a player that you feel like you really want to put on your best performance against?
이제 이 팀이나 이 선수랑 대결할 때만큼은 진짜 내 베스트 이제를 보여주고 싶다 싶은 팀이나 선수 있나요?
꼭 누구를 한 명을 꼭 집어서 이렇게 하고 싶다라는 느낌은 없고요. 저는 그냥 모든 선수들이랑 할 때 제 최대한을 다 보여줬으면 좋겠어요, 매 순간.
Okay, so he said rather than like picking one person out in particular, I'd rather just constantly show my all when I'm playing against all players of all teams.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer.
Jessica Sharnagle from the Game House. Which team do you think will give you the most trouble this year? Any of
Yeah, Shock's the easy answer.
Shock. Yeah.
Maybe Atlanta might be quite good.
Yeah, there's a few teams like Vancouver, New York, Atlanta, maybe those teams underneath them. Shanghai maybe? It's hard for us to say right now, but it's possible. But then Shock's obviously a team everyone's kind of afraid of.
So this is my question for Christopher. So you were on the Fusion coaching staff last year. What is the biggest difference between Fusion 2019 and Fusion 2020 in terms of coaching?
Yeah, I would say it's like a huge culture shift, if anything. I think one thing I've learned pretty quickly is that Western coaches and Korean coaches do things very differently. I think they have very different, everything's kind of different. What they think's important, the way they talk to players, the way they just review everything in general. So I would say last year we definitely, even though we had like two head coaches, one Western, one Korean, I think definitely last year we were a Western type of coaching staff, the way we used to run day-to-day operations. And then this year it's shifted very much towards like a Korean style. So I guess that's the main difference, is just trying to translate the style of coaching from one where it's kind of like a lot of team orientated, and then the Korean tends to be very one-on-one, like individual focus, which is like a pretty big change for me so far.
Jonathan Vippen, Watchpoint Lobby. You guys played a lot of double Barry today, and a lot of people, I think, expected mostly Ryan Diva. Can you speak to why you made that decision as a team to run that composition?
We, at the very start of like figuring out this meta, there was some teams that were Ryan Arissa and there was some teams that were Ryan Diva, and we kind of tried a bit of both, and we kind of just decided to stick with what worked on each map. And one thing that we did last year, which we're trying to stay away from this year, is the idea of just changing comps last minute because other teams are running it. So even though the meta has like maybe slightly shifted one way or another, we're sticking to what we've practiced, and I think, well, at least today it seemed to work.
Another question for Christopher about the off season. Can you tell me a little bit about at the player level how you integrated new players into the team that was established last year?
Yeah, well, I would say that we didn't necessarily integrate in terms of we had a team and then we brought these guys in. We tried to treat it as much like a new team as possible, because it's new coaching staff, and then we had like at least half our rosters new, I would say. And then we did our boot camp in Korea, which again is like a totally different environment to what we're used to. So we kind of tried to start things as a fresh, like kind of there's obviously a lot of problems we had last year, and we felt like if we could, in general, make even the older players feel like it's a new start and it's a new team, that would be better than trying to integrate people in. So everything kind of started afresh this year.
So you guys moved to Philly this year.
Yep.
So what has changed about your process for preparing for games, and how has it been generally living in Philly?
Yeah, I'd say that the main difference, last year we had Team House in LA, right? So the players lived and they just had to come downstairs, and that's how we practiced. Whereas today they actually have to get out of bed and either walk or Uber. So you wouldn't believe how many times they were late when they had to come down the stairs for 11 a.m. But that was too much to ask for some of them. So it definitely, I think it's more helpful as well. It maybe feels more professional, the environment when you guys come into work, instead of just being in your house where the kitchen's over there and your bed's up there. You know, you've actually travelled and then you're in a workspace now. It's professional. You kind of, there's no options but to like try your best. So I'd say that's like the main difference. And obviously the only other change is really that we have a much bigger roster now. So apart, Astro is obviously an exception, but the rest of these guys have had to get used to the idea, especially at the start they only play half of the time and the other guy plays half of it, and then they have to fight for position. Whereas last year almost the starting six played almost the entire year. So those are definitely the two main differences.
So speaking of some of your players, you finally have Alarm on the roster. What is he bringing to the team to kind of like finally have this promised player that everybody's been hyped for? What is he bringing for you guys?
Yeah, I would say he's obviously we know he's good. Like it's easy for me to say he's insane in the mechanics. I'd say the one thing about Alarm specifically, at least in game, is he has like an almost an instinct for positioning. Like when if there's a shatter coming or there's a mail coming, he's always just that far out of it. He's always like he anticipates it 5-10 seconds in advance. But also the thing about Alarm, he's like genuinely the best teammate like you could ask for. Like he's someone who's, think about it, he's like from 16 and he just dominated the entirety of every game he ever played, and he somehow comes into Fusion. He has zero ego. He's happy to learn. He's happy to be friends with everyone. So I guess like yeah, obviously he's good in game, but I think him as a person has really, really impressed me too.
So my question is for Carpe. So Goats was not very easy on a lot of DPS players, right? So how did that affect you as a player in your mentality? And then how are you coming into this season knowing full well you're able to show what you can bring?
그래서 이제 카르페 선수를 위한 질문입니다. 이제 지난 시즌에는 이제 고출 3-3 메타를 하셔야 했는데 이제 딜러 선수들한테는 되게 힘든 메타였었잖아요. 그게 이제 그 메타가 이제 카르페 선수를 선수로서 그리고 그냥 이제 멘탈적으로 생각했을 때 어떤 영향을 줬던 것 같나요? And what was the follow-up after that?
What are you doing? Yeah.
그리고 이제 이번 시즌에는 이제 롤락이 생기고 이제 어떤 모습을 보여주실 준비가 되셨나요?
일단 작년 얘기를 좀 하자면 그 해 전에 결승전에 갔고 그리고 저 개인적으로 제가 약간 자부심이 생겼다고 해야 되나? 그래서 좀 재작년에 했던 거에 비해서 아마 고츠라는 메타에 대해서 좀 깊게 생각하지 않고 메타는 곧 지나간다 약간 이렇게 고치를 좀 낮게 보면서 연습을 좀 약간 게을리했던 약간 그런 것도 없지 않아 있어요. 그래서 그 부분에 대해서 저 스스로도 내가 지금 무엇을 플레이하든 그건 중요하지 않고 내가 지금 당장에 이 일에 집중하는 게 좋겠다라고 생각을 했고 그렇게 작년에 많이 배웠고 그래서 올해 시즌 들어오면서 롤라까지 생기면서 DPS만 플레이하게 되었으니까 좀 더 제가 해야 하는 일에 집중하게 된 것 같아요.
I've got a question for Astro.
Wait,
Oh, sorry, I couldn't see. Sorry.
I mean, if you speak Korean, okay. So to speak about last year, the year before that, they made it all the way to grand finals, and he said, like, I'll admit that I did build a kind of pride on that. So when Goats came around, he didn't think too deeply about it. He kind of looked down a little bit on the meta, and he does admit that he practiced he was a little lazy in terms of practice, and he completely admits that. But the lesson that he learned from that previous year is that he has to focus on the now, you know. And with this new season, he's gonna just do what he needs to do in like the position that he's been assigned.
So I have a question for you. As a rookie coming into the league, do you have anyone who you looked up to before you hit Overwatch League, like a Lucio player, main support player that you aspired to play like when you started out?
Not really. There's like a combination of a few play styles. So I think Mass is really good, and then like Moth and Slime are all great players. And then if you like put a lot of their play together, then I think you have the perfect play. So those are 3 of the good names that I look forward to
Gotcha.
playing against.
So, Poku, you weren't here at the beginning. You haven't talked yet. So, how did it feel to play in front of your home crowd? I know you've gotten to grand finals once, and you kind of played in front of a home crowd, and we didn't quite get there last year. So, how did it feel to finally be in front of all of your Fusion fans?
I mean, it feels amazing. We are like based in LA for like 2 years, and the LA crowd is like pretty boring and cheering for everybody. So once you play like in front of Philly crowd, it's like totally different. And yeah, it feels like when Sada was doing Huge Shadow or when Carpe was like popping off on Widow, it really helped us, and we are like really hyped. So no, yeah, it's amazing to finally be in Philly.
Ups.
Matt Marate from Yellow Jacket, and sort of bounding off that, is that something you have to factor into sort of the beginning of a match, getting pumped up by the crowd, Gritty walking you guys in, all the smoke and pomp and circumstance? So it's sort of a new experience. Is that something you had to sort of mentally adjust for?
To me? No, not really. I mean, we knew like the Philly crowd was going to be behind us, and you guys were going to like boo the enemy team. So it's always like giving us a mentally edge.
No, I wouldn't have said so.
So no, yeah. I mean, we don't really think about it that much, but yeah, we know that we're gonna be like advanced by compared to the enemy team.
All right, time for one more.
Coming from someone who's very new at Overwatch, I just got the game probably 2 months ago, barely even played it. Seen the final in Philly back in, September. Anything to look for? Anything that I should keep my eye open? Like any insight to this game?
Good question. Just play the same heroes. Are you a tank, a support, or a DPS?
Mostly tank.
Okay, then play a Rhine or a Arista, and then you get to go. can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Especially Arista.
Even I scrimmed against them today on Rhine, even me. So it's really easy.
Yeah, you did a great
All
job.
right, great. Thank you guys
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.